my beautiful, wonderful children, and today we are going to be talking about the Wheel of Time once again. I'm going to be cranking up the Wheel of Time videos in the near future because I want to and it's my channel, but don't worry, you're still going to be getting a lot of your typical, Daniel Greene diversity of content. Woo! Today, though, we're going to be talking about a very specific element of the Wheel of Time that I find goes underappreciated and underestimated very frequently, and that is the truly terrifying aspects of the Wheel of Time. This series has some horrific things in it. No, by no means am I claiming that it's grimdark. It doesn't abide by that philosophy or ideology that needs to be at the core of a grimdark story at all. That being said, without question, the Wheel of Time in my mind has very dark elements to it. Now, before we get into specific examples, I do want to talk about the exact reason why I think this underestimation does occur. Robert Jordan's writing style often kind of glosses over the nitty-gritty details of a lot of the worst elements of the Wheel of Time in terms of its true terrifying peaks. I know it sounds counterintuitive to say Robert Jordan and lacking detail in any way, but he as an author does not like to put a magnifying glass to very dark elements. Instead, he allows the reader's imagination to fill in as much detail as it would like. That is why you will see many hardcore Wheel of Time fans make ludicrous claims like, oh, the Wheel of Time is family-friendly, PG, no problem, even though there are many horrific things that happen within this story, including one of our main protagonists cutting off the hand of a man in a brutal torture scene, threatening to remove his feet, other hand, tongues, and eyes, unless he gets the information he wants. That's not PG. But in this video, we're going to utterly destroy the thing Robert Jordan took a lot of time and effort to put into place, and that is the ability for you to kind of gloss over some of the darker aspects of Robert Jordan's incredible Wheel of Time. Now, before we get into specific scenes, I would like to just go into the darker creatures, some of the things that live in this world that on just face value in concept are not things you want to meet in a dark alley or any alley or really just meet in general. And first and foremost is probably the thing that came to most of yours minds when I mentioned the most terrifying elements in the Wheel of Time, and that is Matin Shin, or the Black Wind. The Ways are a very cool tool left over from the age of legends in the Wheel of Time. Basically, the Ways allow you to fast travel throughout the world. Every step you take within them is many steps in the real world, so you can enter a doorway in one city, go a day's journey, and exit the Ways at what would be a 10 days journey in the normal world. What a cool concept, except they've been corrupted, lost their light, and are now occupied by the utterly bone-chilling Black Wind. You do not know where it is, you do not know if it knows you are there, but the Black Wind is forever hunting and prowling the Ways. Coming across unsuspecting prey, it does not matter if it is shadow spawn or human or anything in between, the Ways will feed. You'll know it's near when the winds begin to rise within the Ways, something that does not naturally occur, something that could go ignored if you're not actively looking for it. A slight disturbance on your skin is the first warning sign you will get. From there, the voices will come, driving anyone caught within them utterly insane. From there, we as the readers are not explicitly shown what could happen, but we do know for those who are caught within the Black Wind, death is almost certain, unless you are someone who is going to be later mentioned on this list. Next up, we have one of my favorite characters / creatures within the Wheel of Time, and that is the Golem, something that breaks many of the rules within the series to establish itself as a force to be reckoned with. The Golem cannot be affected by the one power. It is immune to it, so that means the strongest characters we follow, the ones who can use the magic oh so brilliantly crafted within the Wheel of Time, are pretty much just helpless prey to it. I could mention a few specific scenes within this list of why the Golem is so utterly terrifying, but in reality, it's every scene with the Golem that proves why it's so utterly terrifying. An absolute apex predator, the Golem looks like a completely normal average man, a face who will blend in with any crowd. The only difference is, yes, he is immune to channeling, but he is also immune to being cut, stabbed, burned, crushed. Pretty much anything you could think to throw at this creature it will survive. Combine with that a complete lack of morality, a complete focus on killing its prey. This thing makes the actual predator look like a deer caught in headlights. Up until the end of the series, it's proven to us that this golem is unkillable. It is able to crush a man's throat and slip under a door's crack. There is nothing that can stop it from eventually, slowly, ever so unrelentingly finding you. And once you are in the golem's hands, well, we see the result of that several times within the Wheel of Time. People's heads removed, throats ripped out, and there's no better way to describe the victims of the golem when they are found as broken, torn apart as if by a wild animal. And this creature could be anyone standing next to you in a crowd. Next up on this ever so cheery list, we have, in my opinion, the greatest of the Shadow Spawn. Beating out the Trollocs in terms of the terror they bring, we have the Myrddraal. Many of the Shadow Spawn could be worth talking about here, but none strike fear into everyone around them more than the Myrddraal. It is said the gaze of the eyeless is fear itself, and I agree. We are eventually shown how Myrddraal blades are made. We know how the Myrddraal themselves are created, and put it bluntly without getting into too much detail that might get this video demonetized, it's disturbing, extraordinarily so. The emotionless killers for the Shadow. The Myrddraal are the brains leading the mindless murdering Trollocs into a fight. Worth well over 20 men individually in combat, the Myrddraal again are incredibly hard to kill. They can be riddled with arrows or stabbed repeatedly, but a Myrddraal will keep coming. Their blades are supernaturally lethal, and even if you are able to overcome the fear gaze of the Myrddraal itself, which freezes many in place, allowing them to become easy prey, the Myrddraal can move from shadow to shadow. A supernatural ability that is not, in my opinion, fully realized within the Wheel of Time. They can do this. Appearing out of almost nowhere, their pitch white faces may be the last thing you see. Now let's transition out of the just general concept or creatures and move into specific scenes. And there's no better character to start with here and pick the most terrifying scene with than Padan Fain. A man tainted by several forms of darkness. The darkness of man, the darkness of the shadow, and something else. We witness Padan Fain do some of the most atrocious things a person is capable of. Torture, murder, rape, etc., etc. He is basically evil in its most pure form, roaming the earth. He carries a weapon so dangerous, if you are even slightly pricked with it, it will cause you to die a horrific, supernatural plague-like death in a matter of moments. This is a man so terrifying, we watch him torture a Myrddraal, and it works. Obviously, there are many scenes to pick from here, but none bring more terror from me than his escape from the dungeons. Early on in the series, before Padan Fain reaches his true highs of horror, he manages to set the proper tone for himself. He is locked up within the Borderlands, among some of the strongest defenders of the light known to the world. These people spend their whole lives fighting Trollocs and trying to defend the lands to the south from the oncoming hordes. A man like Padan Fain, to us the reader at this point, shouldn't be too much trouble for them. The problem is Padan Fain seems to be having an effect on his captors. They're becoming more short-tempered. There's something off. This all comes to a head when there is an attack, and during this attack, Padan Fain manages his escape. We do not get to witness the actual details of what happens here, but the aftermath certainly leaves one hell of an impact on the reader. Written in blood on the walls is a message from Padan Fain to our protagonist, Randall Thor, telling him to meet him at Tomon Head. Certainly a disturbing thing for our protagonist to find, especially when it is surrounded by mutilated corpses and hardened criminals who have gone insane from what they have been forced to witness as Padan Fain made his escape. This is a man so corrupted by a human evil, he is able to forsake his vows to the Dark One, and he is in possession of the Horn of Valir and a dagger of true corruption. Next up, we have a simple village. A simple village Matt Cawthon in his journeys stumbles upon. Hinderstap. Residing in northern Myrddraal, Hinderstap seems to be a fairly simple town as Matt and his party enter. The only oddity begins to arise once the sun begins to set. We are told the town does not allow visitors past sunset. but that's a bit odd. People need to be able to stay within your town. The reality of the situation soon becomes apparent as our party insists on staying later. We as readers know about what the bubbles of evil are at this point. Essentially, essence of the Dark One becoming manifest within the world, and Hinderstap seems to be in the midst of one of the worst and longest lasting we are aware of within the Wheel of Time. Every night at sunset, the occupants of the village lose all sense of self. Consciousness of who they are, their relationships with each other, everything along those lines are completely and utterly lost. What is replaced is beings of rage and murder. Throughout the night, the occupants of the town are cursed to kill each other. A purge takes place with no humanity. Villagers reduced to essentially animals, tearing each other apart. The truly terrifying part of this curse, though, is that it never ends. Once the sun arises, the village is set back to normal. Everyone awakes within their own bed, the dead now living, all injuries healed. The occupants of the town destined once again to repeat the brutal ritual the next night. The only evidence of what occurred being the physical damage done to the town itself and horrendous nightmares that will then haunt the occupants of the town as the next night comes, and the night after that, and the night after that. There is no escape. Suicide will just cause you to wake up again in your bed the next morning. If you leave, you will be returned. It is truly a cursed town forced to live in endless nightmare on repeat. Where we're going to end this video and where I find a lot of the most horrific elements in the Wheel of Time to rear their head the strongest is in a segment I'm just going to call Rand's Life. Welcome to a new Wheel of Time game show where we're going to go over all the ways we can screw up a farm boy's life. Are we going to make him kill someone he loves, witness mass murder, or put literally the responsibility of the world on his shoulders? Today we'll see in the new show, Rand's Life. Rand is the dragon reborn, the Car, a Karn, and our protagonist, and he is put through one hell of a ringer by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. We as readers have a lot of sympathy and love for him at the beginning of the series. A simple farm boy, very unwilling to go on this fantastical journey, but basically forced to the forefront of it as it becomes ever so clear he is the chosen one. And the horrific elements for his life story essentially begin in the opening pages as he is forced to immediately come face to face with a Myrddraal, something that, as we previously discussed, is not a pleasant event. Within the next few books, this simple farm boy is made to do many terrible things, including murder, reliving and being forced to watch the death of a family repeatedly as flies begin to cover an entire room, a bubble of evil ensnaring him, and watching essentially the death of innocence. As we get deeper into the series, the level of torment Randall Thor goes through only increases. He is forced to live in a box and only taken out to be beaten. He is forced to watch the woman he loves be beaten. He has to come to terms with the reality that he can channel, destined to go insane and possibly accidentally kill those around him. We haven't even gotten to the horrificness of the taint in this video. But if we're going to talk about the most terrifying or horrific scenes within Randall Thor's life, there are really only two scenes that we must dissect carefully. First is when he tries to bring a dead girl back to life. Finally accepting the fact that he is the Dragon Reborn, Randall Thor has a lot on his shoulders. He refuses to let any of it slide off. He must be the chosen one, and he cannot accept failure. Using Kalendor, one of the most powerful magic items in existence within the Wheel of Time, he purges the Shadow Spawn from an attack at the heart of the stone. He wasn't fast enough to save everybody though, and he comes upon a dead child in the middle of the hall. Unable to come to terms with the fact that he failed, this child died before he could act quickly enough, Rand tries to bring her back to life. Violating all decent laws of humanity, Rand forces her heart to pump. He tries to seal the wounds she is bleeding from, doing anything he can. At this point, his mentor, his guide up until now, Moraine, walks in and begins screaming for him to let her go. You cannot heal death. This is unnatural. Rand continues to mutilate the corpse for several seconds, trying to bring her back, trying to restore a child he failed. He is not successful. At this point, our main protagonist, our Dragon Reborn, our Karakarn, has to put down the child's body and come to terms not only with his failure, but what he has done to this body as well. The final scene we're going to talk about here, boy, this is a downer video to get through. Didn't expect that for some reason. is probably the most traumatizing event within the Wheel of Time and something that forever alters our protagonist and one of his main love interests. Semirhage, one of the Forsaken, and I tried to narrow all these horrifying scenes down to just one moment from the Forsaken, and this one clearly won out on top. But Semirhage is debatably the most evil of the Forsaken. Someone who takes great pleasure in pain, treats it like a science, wants to know how to harm the mind and bodies of people like no other. Semirhage comes into possession of a very dangerous item against the Dragon Reborn. An item that allows her to control utterly and completely, more so even than the Shan Chan leashes, any man who can channel, and she manages to get it on Rand. Wanting to completely and utterly break the Dragon Reborn, Semirhage makes Rand turn around and begin to strangle Min, a woman he loves, the woman who has been the rock for Randall Thor throughout most of the Wheel of Time. He begins to choke her. The life is leaving Min as his hands grow ever tighter on her neck. It is not until Rand, out of sheer desperation, figures out how to take advantage of a link he has to another one of the Forsaken to access not Sayadin, not something that is being taken away from him in this moment, but instead the power from the Dark One. Rand uses this power to relinquish himself from Semirhage's control and kill her outright. While this moment seems traumatic enough, its real ramifications are not realized until after it is over. The PTSD of seeing the man she loves, the one person she is closest with, begin to, against his own will, strangle the life out of her, forever affects Min. It's horrifying. I can't even begin to imagine what that would feel like. Rand himself, even though he was not in control, understandably is racked with guilt. Rand becomes the most disconnected and hardened we have seen yet, going down a path to death, no longer even wanting to be alive. Rand essentially gives up and just wants to march to the last battle and to his own demise. Not only is this a terrifying scene for Rand, I find it to be the most terrifying in the entire Wheel of Time. It stuck with me for a long time because of its obvious ramifications for the characters. The trauma of having someone you love strangle you is not something easy to deal with, and on top of that, it's something that is reflected in the real world. Abuse is awful, even if it's forced in some way, as Rand was. It's going to be traumatic. It's trauma many people can relate to, those of us who have been victims of violence in some way. And Min's flinching, Min's reaction, even though she knows it wasn't Rand, even though she forgives him on a logical level, that fear still exists, and I find it to be brilliantly realized, completely terrifying. And the reason, I think, when people say the Wheel of Time's not dark, there's just PG moments only. They are utterly wrong. Anyway, this has just been my list of the most terrifying moments within the Wheel of Time. I compiled all of these to reaching out to Twitter of Time on Twitter and asking them what are the most horrifying moments in the Wheel of Time and picking the highest voted ones or the ones with the most likes or I just agreed with to a certain extent. If you'd like to be a part of videos like this in the future, go ahead and follow me on Twitter using this handle right here. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And have a good one, y'all. Peace! And of course, I'd like to record a special shout out to my latest high-tier Patreon, Jesse Heck. And I just have to say, your profile picture of a llama, probably my favorite profile picture I've seen for Patreon. Have a good one, y'all.